Here's how the Ravengrade Gradelab tool works. I'm currently in a timeline of array log C3 material, and here at the timeline level of my node graph, I'm using the Ravengrade Cinelook 709 plugin to get out to Rec 709 and to impart a creative look along the way. So I've adjusted several of my sliders to taste, and I've selected a look that I like, and I can now grade underneath this plugin for all of my shots. And back here at the clip level, I have an instance of the Gradelab tool, which currently doesn't have any adjustments happening within it, so that we can walk through how each of these sliders works within the tool. And before we dive into the individual sliders, it's important to emphasize the overall theme, the overall concept or idea of the Gradelab tool, and that is that it is a subtractive grading tool. That simply means that it operates in a subtractive CMY, cyan, magenta, yellow space, as opposed to an additive RGB, red, green, blue space. So what that's going to mean essentially is for any of your sliders which have a labeled primary here, that means that as you move off to the right, your image is going to get darker. And as you move over to the left, it's going to get brighter. Because if you're adding color in a subtractive system, you are by definition getting darker. And if you are removing color in a subtractive system, you are by definition getting lighter. So if we take a look at our cyan balance here, this is an offset adjustment. It's just an offset in our CMY space. If I'm adding cyan, I'm just adjusting my offset there, but you can see the image is getting denser or darker as I do so. And I can use each of these sliders to balance out an individual image or even to set an overall look if I wanted to, and simply dial these things into taste. And again, you'll see anytime I'm going off to the right, density is increasing. Anytime I'm going off to the left, density is decreasing or brightness is increasing, okay? And it's important to note when we're looking at our balance here, a question that often comes up when you are grading in a subtractive space is, well, what happened to my red, green, and blue? What if that's what I want? What if I want to add some red? Well, it's the same problem as if you were working in RGB and you wanted to add some cyan. The way you would do that is you would subtract cyan's complement, which is red, right? So if you want to add cyan in RGB, you subtract red. When you are in CMY, let's say you want to add red, what would you do? You would subtract its complement, in this case, cyan. So if you wanted to add red to this image, you could take your cyan balance and move it off to the left, like so. And you'll notice that as I do so, because I'm going off to the left, my density is decreasing. My brightness is increasing because I'm taking away the cyan primary in this subtractive system. For now, I'm going to put this cyan balance back to closer to where it was because I was liking how that was feeling. And if we flip that off and on, we've already got a nice balance coming in and some nice density coming as a result of the adjustments. And we can now look at our saturation sliders. So these are simply a way of subtractively saturating each of our three primaries in whatever strength or measure we would like. So in this case, I think I'd like to push the cyan saturation really hard. Let's just go all the way to the right. And you can see how that's really waking up those mountains in the background and adding some nice life. And also observe that even as these mountains are getting more saturated, they are also getting denser because of the subtractive model that we are working in. And same would be true for our magenta and our yellow. Those things are going to get denser as we saturate them. And I'll also point out that if you were to push your cyan, magenta, and yellow saturations to the same value, let's say they were all at a 1.5, that would effectively be the exact same thing as moving your subtractive saturation slider down here to a 1.5. All that these are doing are allowing you to make a subtractive saturation increase or decrease on your individual cyan, magenta, and yellow channels. And what's fun about that is you can even then go in and add more subtractive saturation, and it's going to be weighted or favored toward whatever channels you added the most saturation to up above. So you can add overall saturation, but if we look at the net of what Gradelab is now doing, we're adding saturation everywhere, but we are adding the most saturation to our cyan, and the second most to our magenta, and the least to our yellow. So it's a nice way of not just globally increasing saturation, but increasing saturation on a per channel basis, and of course in a subtractive mode. And lastly, if we start to bounce around and look at different images, let's go to shot 19 and paste what we've done. That actually travels really nicely. And we can look at this last slider here, which is our push-pull. So we've already observed that virtually any adjustment on any of these sliders is going to have some kind of effect on the feeling of the density of your image. So you may find by the time you've dialed in everything where you want to see it with these prior sliders that you want to pull or to push your image a little more open or a little more closed, depending on what you've done in those prior nodes. So the push-pull is just a simple photometric adjustment that allows you to increase or decrease exposure based on what you've done in your other sliders. And as we continue to bounce around, you can see that the Gradelab tool travels really nicely, and it always produces nice, clean, fundamental results. And it's really a very simple but very effective tool for allowing you to grade in more of a filmic mode and in less of a traditional video RGB mode.